Hi folks who are attending us online with us today. We're going to go ahead and get started in the interest of time to make sure we have enough space to cover everything we're doing today. And so welcome to our folks joining us via Zoom and our folks that are joining us in the room. We appreciate having you here today. My name is Jesse Singleton. I'm the Assistant Director for Student Support with the Graduate School. Joining us online and helping us co-host and running the virtual space, Dr. Shannon Connolly, they're up in the corner, you can see waving there, will be helping us by staffing, checking people into the space and helping us observe the chat and helping us everything digital so we can offer this both in person and online. Ray Varela, who is up here scanning IDs, stepped out to help people find the room, is also one of our graduate school staff. He's our coordinator for student success. He's helping out today as well, and we're excited to have everybody here. So normally I'm a roamer in presentations. I walk around the space a lot. I come here, I go there, because I train to be a classroom teacher and now I do this. But because we're online and I want to be here in front of the webcam, make sure you can hear me, I'm going to station myself here, which is not my natural mode, just so you all know, but we'll make it work. We'll be flexible. We are recording, just so you know. We record because what we do is we put this up online later. So if we're covering something and you're like, I want to remember that, or you're like looking at the slides, know this is going to be available about a week or two once we finish the editing and get it posted. It'll be available on our website for further review. And to folks, if you know a friend is like, man, I really wanted to go, I RSVP'd and something came up, I couldn't get there. It'll be available. So we still have this, just so you know. But also know that when you're asking questions, stuff like that, we're recording and things like that, just so everybody is eyes wide open about what we're doing today. We're talking here about individualized development plans is our topic today. And we're gonna really focus on our goal setting, seeking feedback, and how we track progress. Now, quickly, if I can get a show of hands for folks in the room, and if we have folks in the chat also want to sound off, how many folks have already written an individualized development plan? So about half, a little more than half of our room have already written one. I see people holding up hands. Thank you very much on Zoom. I have written them. That's awesome. We're glad to have you here today, folks that have already written them. This session will hopefully also help you evaluate and improve that and make that a more useful tool in your graduate studies. For our folks that have not written one before, this is also a great primer to get started on and utilize one. Another quick poll of the room. How many folks raise your hand for online and in person if you were doctoral students? It's a few doctoral. Looks like the majority of our online are doctoral. Master students? A couple master students as well. Okay, so an even split. Good, just good to know as we're going through this space. And thank you also for my folks online who are continuing to participate. I love to see it. Make sure we got everybody in. Kind of somebody just joined. Yeah, we're good. All right. So start. Use our clicker here. This one's the clicker, so I'm already right up here. So first off, I'm going to cover briefly why we are discussing IDPs and why the graduate school started using those as a best practice. There's a lot of research behind the individualized development plans and annual reviews in general that show they increase student success, right? So they've been shown to increase productivity, especially when goal setting is included in the IDP, and we have that as part of our process. They show to reduce stress through establishing really clear expectations and reducing uncertainty. So giving you that roadmap reduces that stress, and we know that we already live in a high stress environment. Graduate education is a high stress environment, and the pandemic is a high stress environment, and life is a high stress environment. So if we can reduce that, we want to try to do so. It allows for troubleshooting and early interventions. So again, if you have followed the model where you're going through this consistently, meeting with your mentor, getting good feedback, you can intervene if something's going off the rails and make progress and course correct. And it saves time. You know, if you have that initial investment, you have greater efficiency throughout the year. Now, all of this comes with a caveat that you have to take the document seriously and apply your time to it. If it's a checkbox and you fill it in very quickly, it's not going to do these things for you, right? So like many things, what you get out of it is for what you put into it. And that's what we're hoping to work on today is how can you put a little bit more into this to help you improve the document and make it work for you. So what is the IDP though? Now that may vary by program. Some programs have specific IDPs they prefer to use. Some fields have some more specific IDPs and guidelines they use. But we also have a recommended template. I'm going to move our actual window here because you can see. I move us down. There is a QR code there that if you wanted to pop and scan or come view later, it'll take you to our forms page And then under the student tab, you can access the IDP format and template the graduate school recommends, right? If your program has one, use that. But if your program doesn't have a specific one or you haven't written one before, this is a great place to start. In our template, it includes a comment section, which is a space for you to discuss challenges since the last review you held. And we encourage folks to be really open about that. Tell us what's been going on. What are the successes? What are the challenges? Give us your narrative, because that helps the tone for your conversation with your mentor. I also recommend as you're updating and doing your annual IDP, you don't just copy over that and lose that each time. Find some way to either save a new copy or save that for posterity to kind of think and reflect on your journey as a graduate student. It includes a goal setting section for career and long-term goals. It has a short-term goal grid that we'll kind of talk about and show. And then mentor and committee comment sections, which is an important part of the document, not just the goal setting, but how you get feedback on that and help you track your progress. And then a piece that people forget a lot on their IDP is that there's a spot where you should be updating your CV each time you go through that review. So update the CV and include it as a document, okay? So that is what the IDP is. Now, if you're working on one, know that another thing that's great about coming to this workshop and getting one completed is that if you apply for funding with the graduate school, we require an IDP be submitted. And for things like the Dodson Research Grant and the Travel Grant, that IDP gets evaluated and is part of your score. So if you've got a really quick checkbox IDP that it's technically done, that counts. We won't disqualify your application, but you won't score as highly in that section as someone that has really went through and carefully completed that IDP and shown that thought and investment, because it helps us understand you as a student and what your objectives and goals are. So the stronger your IDP, it can help you on those applications. So thinking about tips for how we create the IDP, the first is be intentional and reflective. Again, the more effort and time and reflection you put into this document, the more it will serve you and actually achieve those goals we've been talking about. Utilize SMART goals in creation of your goals. Seek that constructive feedback from your mentors, and then revisit and update that plan regularly. It should be a living document. It's not here and it's done, it's set in stone. Edit, change, make revision. I think it's good to find some way to catalog so you can see that progress over time so you're not losing that. That's also why it's always good when you update a resume, not to write over your existing resume. Always make a copy and start new so you have a record of your resume or CV, how it developed. Always keep that in mind, right? But revisit this. It is a living document. Today, we're going to be focusing mostly on the SMART goals and the constructive feedback, right? The intentionality and the reflective piece, that's on you. You got to do that if you want to be successful. The making it a living plan and continue to work on it, again, that's what you take away from this. Those are internal things for you. But what I can work with you on helping understand and maybe work on and polish is the SMART goals and the feedback piece. So that's where we'll spend a lot of our time today. Sound good? I'm going to pause for a second there to see if there are any questions before we jump to the next section. We're going to be talking about goals. Any questions? Let's take a peek.
Seeking constructive feedback means we should seek feedback from mentor or someone else.
So in the IDP, it's primarily from your mentor or maybe your committee, right? And we'll talk a good bit about feedback and a couple different steps for that. So love the question, and we'll probably address some of that. So we'll come back around to it. But yeah, when we say seek feedback, that's generally what we're considering. But I do think when you're thinking about goals and things like that, there is space to get feedback from multiple sources, even if it isn't formally included in your IDP. See none in the chat. Any other questions? All right. So getting into the bit about goals. So we're going to start there. Goals are going to vary for each individual person and their plan. They can vary by duration. You want to have your long-term goals, that's your career goals, job goals, long-term aspirations. And then you need the short-term goals, year, semester marks, sometimes even weekly mark to be successful. So you want to track and have those different variations and steps along the way when you create these goals. They also will vary by type. Some are going to be performance goals, finish a chapter here, take this professional exam, receive this teaching certificate. These performance goals help you make sure you're hitting all the marks to be successful. Some of them are a little more learning focused, right? So you may need to work on some specific aspects of your writing you want to improve. You want to learn a language, you want to work in a lab to improve a specific skill. So you may have those learning goals that are very relevant for you in completing your program. But you want to have a mix of these in the things that you do. And we're not the only ones that do this, but we talk a lot about SMART goals in the work that we do. So when you think about the duration and the learning goals and the performance goals, at the end of the day, we encourage you to sit down, take those goals and make sure they are SMART, which is an acronym like everything that's good. SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound, right? Research shows that if you write your goals with all these criteria in mind, you're more likely to achieve those goals. Some examples of why you can see this as useful is you may have a goal that is, I need to avoid bees. Okay, but why and how are you going to avoid bees? They're everywhere. At least I hope they're everywhere. Otherwise, we're in big trouble. A SMART goal would be saying, I need to avoid being stung more than 10 times during the October honey collection due to my allergies, right? It's specific, it's measurable, it's achievable, maybe. I don't know, I'm not a beekeeper. It's relevant, you have an allergy, it's time bound, it's October, right? It hits all those marks, you're much more likely to achieve that because it's very specific what you have to do. Think about this from the actual academic lens though, from the abstract. If you write down the goal that you want to get a meaningful position in your field after graduation, that's a fine goal on its surface. But it's really hard to successfully achieve because there's no specificity to it, right? What does that mean? What does meaningful mean for you as an individual? How do you know when you've done it? And if you don't have that specificity and it's not time bound, you won't be as driven to succeed or to achieve that goal, right? So it's about increasing your mental productivity towards it. A SMART goal would be saying something like, I want to accept a job offer for a position that offers opportunities for professional advancement in my academic or professional life. That's meaningful for you, right? It's going to give me advancement opportunities. And I want that within 2 months of completing my degree, right? Is that achievable? Yeah. Might that be a high bar depending on your field? Yeah. But you want to set something that's like, you know what? I need to strive for that, right? Our hurdles, we don't want them all down here. For my folks online, I'm going way towards the floor. You might not see that. We don't want our hurdles low to the floor, right? We want something we can reasonably jump over. For thinking about, not just career focus, but thinking about the academic lens, writing down a goal on your IDP that says that you want to complete a partial dissertation draft for your mentor to review feels like, oh yeah, there's a goal, but it's not time bound in any way, right? And what does a partial dissertation draft look like? How much is a partial dissertation draft? When does it need to be done? And so you'll fumble around without having some of that specificity. But if you give yourself a goal that says, complete a draft of chapter 2 and 3 of my dissertation for review by October 15. You have that deadline, you know what you need to complete, you're much more likely to get there, right? I'm going to move actually minimize the view pane so I don't block this. Something else I'll throw out there is the ability to use if-then planning when you're developing routines that contribute to your goal completion, right? So, and again, there's research behind this that shows that if you can kind of set something where if this, then this, you will push yourself towards action, right? It's a method for eliminating bad habits and eliminating procrastination and achieving goals, right? And so if you're working through your goals and you make a SMART goal, but you don't quite know how you'll get there, or you need to set some habits to reach it, I encourage you to sit down and not necessarily on your IDP, but as a companion document, write down some if-then statements, right? You might write down an if-then statement that says that if I have a half an hour of free time between classes, then I will work on this section of my dissertation, right? If I've got a free Saturday, then I will devote X amount of time to my dissertation, right? set those goals or set those steps can help you move towards that action space, right? Because sometimes the hardest thing is figuring out how would I do that, right? How am I going to get 2 and 3 done? And if then is a really powerful tool to like operationalize some of those even small chunks of time. So something to consider. So this is an example when we talk about the IDP, when we think about the short-term goals in the grid, this is what it looks like, including some goals from a student. So on the document, you have that long-term section. It's really more of a box. You can add in your stuff. The short-term goals is this grid where you write in what you want to do. So this person wants to complete chapter 4 and 5, some of the advisor, there's a whole timeline there. And then once you set that, you can kind of put in your progress, living document. How are you doing? And then your mentor can give feedback when you do the review to let you know how things went. This is what that section looks like, right? And this is where we're kind of going to be living and working today. Cool? Folks have seen this before? Most? Right. With that, we're going to take a break from Jesse talking to you all doing a bit of work. And so I want you to go ahead and pull out your IDP if you got it. If not, just start working on and thinking about this. But I want you to write one long-term goal that you would include on your IDP. Sorry, I'll take a mental step back. I have 2 activities. For folks that haven't written an IDP, so the other piece of this that we're going to talk quite a bit about, we talk about goal setting. That's for you. We're also going to talk about the mentor-mentee relationship that you have and how to be successful there. Because as you work on and write these goals, that feedback piece is critical, right? Now, again, this is where I'll poll the group a little bit. We'll do show of hands online and in the room. How many of our folks have a formal mentor assigned by the institution? A couple folks. Folks that do not have a formal assigned mentor by the institution? A few. Right? I think that's a little more common in the master's program. For folks that don't have a formal mentor, do you have someone that you seek to that you would think of as a mentor? Desiree, shake your hand. Yes. Okay. Excellent. All right. So if you don't have a formally assigned mentor and you don't have an informal one, I encourage you really strongly to seek someone out, right? And we'll talk a bit about that too. But again, that feedback loop is critical, right? So we're going to talk about this in phases. The first is how you build that strong mentor-mentee relationship, right? Because that's going to be at the core. There's a whole separate thing we can talk about how you ask someone to be your mentor. That's a whole separate session that I could do for y'all. But the crux of it is ask them because that's the most intimidating thing. Going up and saying like, hey, I would like you to be my mentor is the hardest part, but that's what you got to do, right? But from the relationship building, once you've asked, first is set some SMART goals. Check, we've done it, right? We know we got to do that. But you got to have those SMART goals. They got to have something to work with you on. So set SMART goals. You need to be an active partner and show that interest, right? If you ask someone, will you be my mentor? And then you ghost them, they're not going to come looking for you. So you have to go looking for them. Maintain and initiate that contact, right? Don't wait for your mentor to reach out to you. Be like, hey, do you want to do a session? Reach out, maintain that contact, right? I'll also throw out a mentor. Should also do some reaching out to you, check in on you, especially if they know things are really stressful. My mentor sent me a text the other day asking me a random question just because he seemed to have some idea that I was having a rough day. And he sent me a random text that wasn't even related to why I was having a rough day. And I'm like, how did he know, right? But maintain that contact, initiate those contacts. Make sure you show appreciation, right? That individual is giving you of their time, right? So make sure you show that appreciation back to them. Again, we can do a whole session on love languages and how we show appreciation and finding ways that person appreciates. But again, a whole different session, but figure it out and then do that. Be prepared for your meetings, right? If you show up, you don't have anything to take notes on, you don't know what you're going to talk about. Again, it shows that you're not really engaged, right? You want to make them feel like this person is valuing the time that I'm putting into them. It's not an uphill battle, right? So come prepared. Whatever that means for you, but come prepared. Apply what you learn, right? So if they go through and they're talking you through things, giving you step and feedback and advice, you know, now you have to take everything they say like, that's what I'm going to do, because you might disagree, and that's okay too. But apply what you're learning with them. and then seek that constructive feedback, right? Gold star, thumbs up, might make you feel good, but isn't necessarily going to stretch you and help you grow. Seek the constructive feedback. Take the attaboys, right? Okay, I need that to build my self-esteem and keep moving forward and use that for motivation. But I also need that constructive piece to keep growing as a professional, as an academic, as a person. And that seek constructive feedback piece, that is also really hard. And so we're going to talk about, okay, so I'm building this strong relationship with a mentor. How do I then take and get the feedback that is going to be useful to me? Because that on the surface seems like, oh yeah, I go and get feedback, but it's much more complex than that. So pulling this back to our IDP and thinking about the reviews you have, the feedback you get in reviews should have mentors giving that feedback in alignment with your goals, both short and long term, right? If you bring your IDP or you come to a review session and they start talking about goals that are not on your list, it's not effective feedback for you, right? My goal is to be a professor. All the feedback is about working at a profit biotech firm. Maybe something to think about, because career diversity is useful to think about what paths you could take, but the only feedback you get is about the field over here. Stepping back to be able to see my emotions. Field over here, instead of what you're doing, it's not as relevant to you. So you got to try and target it. It should be within your program requirements, and it should be quality, right? So they should be talking about the difficulty of what you're working on, but make sure it's achievable, right? Again, not just the load goals. Mentor should give positive feedback. We apply that asset-based approach at UTEP. So it should be positive feedback even when it's constructive, right? And they should revisit it throughout the year. Not some basics of what we're hoping to get out of the mentor, but again, how do you get that? That's where this comes in. So when you're seeking constructive feedback, there's a couple of steps that you can follow. First is seeking it more frequently, because it's easier to ask for feedback and receive it when it's part of your typical flow, right? If you ask for feedback once a semester or a year, maybe harder to get good quality feedback or get timely feedback. So even though the IDP may be reviewed yearly, you can still come back and pull it out at each meeting and meet more regularly and get regular progress on what you're doing. So try to have that frequent constructive feedback. Make sure you're critically evaluating the kind of feedback you need and then ask for that, right? What do you need as the mentee? The mentor shouldn't necessarily drive that. So do you need performance feedback? Do you need general coaching on skills? Do you need a positive comment here and there? Figure out what you need to be successful. And again, this is where the reflective piece comes in really handy. Make sure you're seeking it in a timely manner. Don't wait until the end of the year to get that feedback, because if the goal was for September and you're getting feedback in May, right, almost a calendar year later, it's not super timely, and can you take action on it, right? If you had a goal set for September and you get feedback in October, it's timely. You can see if you need to revisit that goal or if you've achieved it. Try to ask open-ended questions. So don't necessarily sit down and say, here's what I got, do you have any feedback? You get a lot of, no, it's okay, yeah, and, good job, maybe think about this, but it'll be much more limited, right? So you want to really ask the open-ended questions. How can I do blank? What could be done to improve here, right? Target those questions on the feedback you need, make them open-ended. That shows that you're looking for the constructive feedback and you're open and receptive to that conversation. Probe for examples if the feedback is vague. Again, we hope that your mentors are really active participants and really great at feedback, but we're all human beings, and some people are more natural mentors or more naturally good at giving constructive feedback, or on any given day someone has a bit more time. And so if you get feedback and you're like, this is kind of vague, I don't quite know what they're trying to ask me to do or give me feedback on, ask questions. Don't just take it, okay, I've got it, I'm gonna walk away. Look at it, review, probe. Tell me more about this. I want to work on this, but I don't quite understand. It's a give and take. Make sure you're collecting feedback on your goals and your performance. It's like, these are my SMART goals. Are these goals good? Is this achievable? Talk to me about how I've written my goals, and then how have I performed in achieving those? And this one can be really tough, especially when we moved into a very digital environment. But you can't underestimate the power of that one-on-one conversation, the Teams call, or being on Zoom with somebody, or picking up the phone. Don't rely just on email for your communication with your mentor. It tends to be very flat, one-sided, transactional conversations, right? If you can get a little more life, even you can be in person, great. If you're sitting on Zoom, that's still great. Have that back and forth. But also be a bit more productive. As I was talking to my colleague Ray earlier today about chatting over Teams and things like that, sometimes it takes a half an hour to resolve something over a Teams chat that if you picked up the phone call would take 2 minutes, right? So if you're going in this back and forth transactional format of text only, it may take longer and it may be more flat than finding some way to have a real-time connection with that mentor. So that's encouraged. Not that email doesn't have its place, because it definitely does. This, so you can see the wonderful graphic that I have there. The next thing is, okay, you know how to seek that feedback and ask for it, but are you ready to receive that constructive feedback? Because that is hugely important. Not everybody's great at it. It's not natural for us sometimes. Sometimes we get defensive. We get constructive feedback, right? We start talking about your goals and they start kind of picking it apart and saying, you know, it's really not very specific. If you spend some time on it, you might feel really powerfully connected to that, right? So we need to step back and think about how are we to be ready to receive the feedback? We're asking for constructive feedback, and that may be a pain point occasionally, especially if we're not performing the level we could be. But you need to be ready to receive it so you continue to get the good constructive feedback and you improve. So some ways to be ready for constructive feedback. Listen to hear, not to respond. Right? This is just general good advice for communication in your lives. When you're talking to somebody and they're telling you a story, you don't listen getting ready to tell them a response. You listen to hear and appreciate. This is important when you have that mentee relationship, getting feedback. Listen, evaluate, think about it. Take time to process before responding, right? Especially if you have some feelings about the feedback you get. Sometimes your hot take is not the best take. So give it a minute, give it an hour, give it a day, sit in that feedback, ruminate, reflect, then have a response if you have questions, right? Ask for more information if you need it, right? You get feedback and you don't get it. Don't just go internally, I don't get that, but I'm going to go on my way because they're the PhD and I'm not. Reflect, think about it, analyze, and go, you know what? I need more information on that. Ask for more time if you need it, right? If you need to reflect, you're like, I need to think about that a bit. Can I have a bit more time? Can I get back to you on that? They ask for feedback and they give you something and once you develop action steps, need some more time to sit with that. Ask for that, right? If you need that time, you don't ask for it, but you take it, it looks like you disengaged. So let them know how you're feeling. Create an action plan for improvement. If you get that critical feedback and it shows that area of growth, okay, then create that action plan. Maybe that's where you go to the if-then steps, right? You set this goal to have these chapters to me by this time. They came in 2 weeks late and they didn't feel very polished. Okay, what are my action steps to get it there to where it needs to be? Seek peer support as well, right? Sometimes you need to talk about and frame that conversation. That shouldn't necessarily become trash your mentor session, but seek support and feedback and talk to your peers, right? You need that support network. Sometimes you might need to say, like, I had this session, this is the feedback I got, it was frustrating for me. And your peer can recontextualize it and help you understand what was being said so that you have that time to reflect. You bring it back to the mentor for a productive conversation. And then follow up in the long term, right? As you're working through, you get the feedback, follow up in the next meeting and let them know how things are going or how you've improved, how you applied what they were trying to work with you on. That's that application piece that we talked about in the building the relationship. Make sense? So that brings us to our second kind of concluding activity. We'll have two parts. The first part is going to take 5 minutes, and I want you to really consider the type of mentorship you are looking for, right? There's a lot of ways you can do this, but I want you to try and answer these basic questions and then add on any of your own. Think about how frequently you want to meet with your
journey. So you can always contact us at gradpd@utep.edu. I'll post that also here in the chat. And thanks for joining us. Everyone, have a great rest of your afternoon, and please be in touch if we can support you.
Here. How are we doing? Oh, hold on. Before you respond, I realize you're actually very quiet, so I won't be able to hear you. 1 second. How are we doing in the digital space?
We're doing well. I actually thought you forgot to unmute yourself. So we had some really good feedback. I'm going to save the chat transcript because these folks were awesome, shared back a lot of what they reflected on in the mentor relationship activity, and we're good.
Wonderful. Well, I'll share with the online folks who didn't just hear my quick spiel as we're closing out. We have the email posted there for Grad PD. That is a great place to start if you have any questions about this subject or really any other subject. I'm generally the person on the end of that, and myself and some other colleagues that will always seek to assist and support you. So if you have something, you need something, please send us an email. As I mentioned at the start of this presentation, we will record this. We'll eventually put it up online. Give us about a week or two to go through and do the processing and do the editing and things like that. And we'll get that up there. So if you're like, I remember something from that session, but I can't remember exactly what the piece on feedback was, you'll be able to go back and review this or just send us a question on it. I'll hang back. I'm going to go ahead and Shannon, if we want to go ahead and stop recording, and then I'll hang